I used to believe love meant sacrifice. That if I gave everything, my heart, my dignity, my very life, he would finally see me, finally choose me. But I was wrong. The last memory of my previous life still burned inside me like a cursed flame. It was raining that night. Heavy, merciless rain. My wedding dress clung to my skin, ruined, torn at the hem. The streets were empty, except for the crowd that had gathered under umbrellas and lanterns outside the banquet hall. And there he stood, my fiancé, my beloved, my obsession. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't reaching for me. Instead, his arm was wrapped tightly round her. Her pale face tilted up at him, wet from rain but glowing with his affection. The woman he called his true love, the one he swore to protect, no matter the cost. And I was nothing more than the villain in their love story, scheming woman. Someone in the crowd spat, their voice cruel, echoing against the night. Yes, she tried to hurt the young miss again. Another shouted. The whispers and accusations drowned me. Lies woven so tightly around me that no matter how I clawed, I could not escape. And he, my fiancé, stood there like a righteous knight, glaring at me as though I were filth. His words, sharp and merciless, cut deeper than any blade. You've gone too far. From this day forward, I will never let anyone harm her, even if that person is you. I remember my knees giving way, my body collapsing into the cold water pooling at my feet. I remember how my chest tightened, not from the chill, but from the shattering of my heart. He had chosen her again, even after all I had done for him. The sacrifices, the tears, the endless compromises. None of it mattered. To him, I was a liar, a schemer, a villainess standing in the way of true love. That night, I stopped being his fiancée. I stopped being anyone at all, because soon after I died, a fall down the marble staircase, a broken body sprawled across the floor. I still remember the coppery taste of blood on my lips, the final sound of his voice calling her name, not mine. I thought death would be the end. But fate is cruel. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight streamed through embroidered curtains. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and fresh tea. For a moment, I thought it was a dream. But when I sat up, heart pounding, I recognized the room. It was my bedroom. Not the one I died in, but the one from years ago, the days before the wedding, before the humiliation, before the betrayal. I was alive. I stumbled to the mirror, nearly tripping over the long silk hem of my nightgown. And staring back at me wasn't the broken woman I remembered. My face was smooth, unscarred by tears and grief. My eyes were brighter, my skin untouched by the pain of my final night. My hands shook as I touched my reflection. Reborn, I whispered. I've been reborn. My heart should have soared. I had been given another chance, but then I heard his voice from outside the door, muffled yet sharp. Tell her to behave herself. If she causes trouble again, I won't tolerate it. My chest froze. It was him. The man I loved. The man who ruined me, even in this life. His disdain for me was already carved in stone. But this time, I wouldn't kneel. This time, I wouldn't sacrifice. This time, I wouldn't waste my heart on a man who vowed to protect another while crushing me beneath his feet. I clenched my fists, my nails digging crescents into my palms. Yes, I murmured to myself, a bitter smile curving on my lips. Reborn, I will not live as I once did. He will call me scheming. Let him. But I won't play his story's villain again. This time, I will write my own ending. And that was the moment my second life truly began. The morning continued as though nothing had changed. Servants bustled about, preparing tea, adjusting curtains, whispering gossip. To them, I was still the fiancée, still the proud young lady promised to the heir of a powerful family, but inside me, everything had shifted. I watched my fiancé enter the courtyard later that day. His tall figure, handsome features, the commanding aura that once made me weak now, it only fueled the fire in my veins. He walked past me without a glance, his eyes fixed on the delicate girl behind him. The same girl who, in my last life, destroyed me piece by piece while painting herself innocent. My lips curled upward in the faintest, coldest smile. They thought I was still the same foolish woman who would sacrifice everything just to hold on, but they would soon learn. This time, I wouldn't beg for crumbs. I would rise and they would break. The first days after my rebirth felt unreal. Every morning, I woke up expecting to find myself sprawled on that staircase again, the taste of blood in my mouth, my last breath fading as he shouted another woman's name. But no. Each time, I opened my eyes to the softness of embroidered pillows, the scent of morning tea, the muffled voices of servants. I was back. Truly back. The gods or fate, or perhaps my own unwillingness to die had granted me this chance. And I swore on my broken heart, I would not waste it. Still, the pain of my past life lingered like a wound that refused to close. Every time I saw him, my fiancé, the memories flooded me. His cold glares, his harsh words, the way he had stood, shielding her while condemning me. I had loved him with everything I had. I thought my loyalty, my devotion, my sacrifices would one day melt his icy heart. But instead, he looked at me as though I were poison, and her as though she were light. Even now, standing in the courtyard, watching him from the balcony of my chambers, I saw it again. The tenderness in his gaze, the protective hand he placed on her back, the faint smile reserved only for her. I wanted to laugh. Bitterly, coldly. In my last life, I thought this sight meant I had to fight harder, sacrifice more, cling tighter. But this time, I would let go. Let them believe what they wished. Let them call me scheming. Let him vow to protect her. I would no longer be a pawn in their little drama. Later that day, my maid, Liane, came rushing into my chambers, her face pale. My lady. Trouble again. Her trembling hands held a folded piece of parchment. She placed it in front of me. I unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. Accusations. Of course, she tried to push me down the stairs. The letter claimed, "Your fiancé resents me, but I beg you, please don't blame her too harshly. I know she is only jealous of me. Jealous. Always jealous." That word had clung to me like a curse in my past life. And who was this delicate handwriting from? The so-called innocent her. I smirked. The memory returned to me vividly. In my last life, this letter had been the spark that lit the flames of my ruin. He had stormed into my chambers, thrown the letter at me and shouted that I was nothing but a schemer, unworthy of his name. I had cried, begged, denied the accusations until my throat bled. But he hadn't believed me. He had chosen her. I let the parchment fall from my hands this time, a dry laugh escaping my lips. Liane looked horrified. "My lady, what should we do? If the young master sees this, he will do exactly what he did last time." I cut her off coolly. "He will scold me, perhaps curse me, perhaps vow again to protect her." Her eyes widened. Then aren't you afraid?" I stood, my silk robe swaying as I moved towards the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, a young woman, proud and unbroken, Afraid, I whispered, tilting my head with a smile that was anything but gentle. No, Leanne. I've already lived through the worst he could do. What's there left to fear? The confrontation came sooner than expected. That evening, he arrived. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes like frozen steel. His presence filled the room, making the servants tremble and bow their heads but me. I sat calmly at my dressing table, combing my hair as though he were nothing more than a passing shadow. Explain yourself, he snapped, tossing the crumpled letter onto the table. His voice was sharp, commanding, used to obedience. I met his gaze in the mirror, my comb pausing for only a second. Explain what? I asked lightly, almost bored. His jaw clenched. Do not play games. You've been tormenting her again. Pushing her, threatening her. How low will you sink? The old me would have wept, begged, fallen to my knees, insisting on my innocence. But that woman was gone. I placed the comb down, stood slowly, and turned to face him fully. If you've already decided to believe her, I said softly, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, then what use is my explanation? His brows furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. He hadn't expected this. He expected tears, desperation, denial. But not calm. Not indifference. He stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. So you admit it, then? I tilted my head, studying him the way one might study a stranger. Admit it. Deny it. What difference did it make? I let out a quiet laugh. Believe what you like. The silence between us was sharp, almost unbearable. His fists clenched at his sides, his eyes darkening with something I couldn't quite name. Finally, he hissed, pathetic, and he turned on his heel, leaving as quickly as he came. The door slammed behind him, the echo reverberating through my chambers, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. Instead, I poured myself a cup of tea, my hand steady, my lips curling upward. As oh, this was how it felt to let go. To no longer live and die by his words. Strange. It didn't hurt as much as I thought. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the scene in my mind. His anger. His confusion. The way his eyes had lingered on me a moment too long. He thought me pathetic. But in truth, he was the one who looked weak, rattled, unsettled, unsure. And that was only the beginning. For every step he and his precious true love took, I would not chase after them anymore. I would watch, I would wait. It wouldn't be me kneeling in the rain this time. It would be them, and I would be the one smiling. The next few days passed in quiet tension. He didn't come to see me again, though whispers of him escorting her through the gardens reached my ears every morning. In my past life, those whispers would have cut me open like 1,000 tiny blades. I would have run to him, confronted him, begged him to look at me, to see me, to remember that I was his fiancé. But now I sat in the courtyard, sipping tea, letting the sun warm my skin. The gossip floated around me like ethers I could brush away with a flick of my sleeve. Leanne fretted at my side. My lady, people are starting to talk. They say the young master dotes on her too much, that perhaps the engagement. Let them talk, I interrupted smoothly, setting down my cup. I wasn't going to waste my breath defending an engagement that had already been shattered once in another life. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time before the stage was set for my public humiliation, the same one that had branded me scheming and jealous in my past life. And I was right. The occasion came during the spring banquet. It was an annual event, hosted in the grand halls of his family estate. Nobles, merchants, scholars all gathered beneath glittering lanterns and rows of cherry blossoms. Musicians played gentle strings while servants moved gracefully with trays of wine and delicacies. I remembered this banquet too well. In my previous life, it had been the night my reputation was destroyed. She had accidentally tripped near the lotus pond, nearly falling into the water. He had rushed forward to save her, and somehow, the blame had landed squarely on me, accused of pushing her in jealousy. No one had believed my denials. Not even him. But this time, I would not give them the chance. I arrived dressed in crimson silk embroidered with golden peonies. The color was bold, almost scandalous compared to the pale hues most young ladies favored. My hair was adorned with a single golden pin, my lips painted a deep shade of red. Whispers followed me as I entered. She looks different tonight. Is that truly the fiancé? She seems colder somehow, bolder too. Look at those eyes, like she doesn't care for anyone here. I smiled faintly, gliding past them. Let them whisper. Their words no longer pierced me, they only fed the fire inside. And then I saw them. He stood near the center of the hall, surrounded by sycophants and flatterers. Tall, handsome, untouchable. And beside him, as always, was her, dressed in soft blue silk, with a fragile smile and eyes that glistened as though a single word might bring her to tears. She leaned subtly into him, playing the part of the helpless beauty in need of protection. He glanced at her with that same tenderness that had once torn me apart. But when his eyes flicked to me, there was only coldness. The scene was set, the actors in place, and I was no longer the fool in their script. The accident happened almost as if rehearsed. She stepped too close to the edge of the lotus pond, her slipper sliding on the damp stone. A shrill gasp escaped her lips as she stumbled forward, arms flailing dramatically. The crowd gasped. In my last life, this was the moment where I had been accused of pushing her. The perfect stage for my disgrace. But this time, I remained seated at a nearby pavilion, calmly sipping my tea. My hands were steady, my expression unbothered. It was another young lady, startled by her sudden movement, who caught her arm and kept her from falling. The girl flushed in embarrassment, apologizing profusely. But of course, the innocent one turned her wide eyes toward him, clutching his sleeve as though she had narrowly escaped death, and he predictably wrapped an arm around her shoulders, glaring at the unfortunate girl who had tried to help. How callous, he snapped. You could have harmed her. The girl's eyes welled with tears, her lips trembling as she tried to explain, and just as I expected, his gaze slid toward me, searching, waiting, because in his mind, I was always the culprit, always the jealous schemer waiting in the shadows. Don't look at me, I said coolly, setting my teacup down with a sharp clink. My voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, stunned. I rose slowly, smoothing my crimson skirts, and walked toward them with measured steps. Each step echoed against the stone, deliberate and hurried. When I reached them, I tilted my head, meeting his gaze directly. For the first time, I didn't look away. If you wish to blame me again, I said softly, my smile cold, do it openly. Accuse me here, before everyone. Let them all hear how your fiancé has nothing better to do than push women into ponds at a banquet. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. Mind your tone, my tone. I laughed lightly, shaking my head. You think I care enough to scheme against her? That my life revolves around your fragile little flower? The hall went silent. Even the musicians faltered, their strings dying mid-note. Her face paled, her lips parting as if she might cry. But I didn't spare her a glance. My eyes were locked on him. You've already made your choice, I continued. You've already vowed to protect her, no matter what. So tell me, what am I to you now, except a convenient villain to cast blame upon? A heavy silence settled over the banquet. No one had ever dared speak to him this way before. His eyes burned, fury and something else swirling in their depths. But I didn't wait for his reply. I turned, my crimson silk swaying like fire as I walked away. Behind me, I heard the shocked murmurs of the crowd. She's changed. She spoke back to him. Did you see her smile? Cold as ice. And though I didn't look back, I could feel his gaze searing into my back, heavy and unsettled. For the first time, the script had not gone as he expected. For the first time, I had refused to play the part, and that refusal was only the beginning. After the spring banquet, the household buzzed with whispers. Some claimed I had gone mad. Others said I was finally showing my true colors. But most were simply stunned. For years, I had played the obedient fiancé, soft-spoken, gentle, always lowering my head in the presence of my fiancé. Even when they called me jealous, even when they accused me, I had bowed, apologized, begged for forgiveness, but now I had laughed in his face, called his beloved a fragile little flower, walked away from him as if he were nothing more than a passing guest. The air had shifted, and everyone could feel it. The next morning, I rose before dawn. In my past life, I had spent my mornings waiting for news of him. What was he doing? Where was he going? Who was he with? My days had revolved around him like the moon around the sun, distant but enslaved. But not this time. This time, I began with myself. I called for Lian to bring the account books of my dowry estate. They were dusty, untouched for months. In my past life, I had never paid them any mind, too preoccupied with chasing a man who never looked back. But now, I spread them across my desk, flipping through page after page. The numbers were messy, riddled with inconsistencies, corruption. I muttered under my breath. The stewards are stealing. Lian gasped. My lady, what will you do? What I should have done long ago, I said coolly. Take back what is mine. By noon, I was standing in the estate's hall, staring down a row of nervous stewards. They shifted uneasily, sweat glistening on their brows as I flipped through the books before them. In 3 months, I said, my voice steady, the profits from the silk farms dropped by nearly half. And yet the records show no crop failures, no disasters. How curious. The men swallowed hard. I slammed the book shut, the sound echoing through the hall. You think I am blind? That I am some foolish girl too busy clinging to her fiancé to notice when silver goes missing from my coffers? They fell to their knees, stammering excuses. But I didn't soften. Not this time. I will not tolerate leeches, I snapped. You have 3 days to return every coin you've stolen. Fail, and I will drag your names before the magistrate. Their faces blanched. They knew I meant it, because this time, I wasn't the weak fiancé whose worth was measured only by a man's approval. I was the master of my own estate. Within days, the coffers began to refill. The servants whispered in awe, watching as I reorganized the ledgers, replaced crooked stewards with sharp-eyed ones, and personally oversaw the management of my properties. She's different, they murmured. Stricter, smarter. Scary. No wonder the young master looks unsettled. Yes. My fiancé, he came to see me after word of my actions spread. He found me in the garden, reviewing contracts while sipping tea. My crimson skirt swirled around me, bold as flame against the pale blossoms. "You've been busy," he said, his tone carefully neutral. I looked up, offering him the faintest smile. "Is that a problem?" His brows furrowed. "Your duties are to this household, not to accounts and contracts. Why waste your energy?" I interrupted smoothly. "Tell me, Fiancé, is it wasteful to ensure I am not robbed blind?" He stiffened. He wasn't used to my interruptions. He wasn't used to me speaking with such cool confidence. "You're being unbecoming," he said finally. I laughed, low and sharp. "Unbecoming to whom?" "To you." His jaw clenched. I could see the storm in his eyes, the frustration at a woman who no longer bent to his will. Once, that storm would have terrified me. Now, it only amused me. "Do as you please," he snapped at last, turning away. "But don't embarrass me, embarrass him." If only he knew. Days bled into weeks, and my reputation began to change. The nobles who once whispered about my jealousy now spoke of my intelligence. The merchants who once dismissed me as a spoiled fiancé now sought my approval for their ventures, and slowly, quietly, power shifted. At tea gatherings, people began approaching me directly, no longer treating me as a mere extension of him. "She carries herself differently. Her eyes, sharp, calculating. She's not the girl we thought she was." And he noticed at first. He ignored it, confident that his shadow would always eclipse mine. But as more eyes turned toward me, as more voices praised me, I saw the cracks appear in his calm. The way his gaze lingered when I spoke with others. The way his fists tightened when another man complimented my wit. The way his jaw ticked when I laughed freely. Unbound for the first time in years, he was unsettled, confused, frustrated, and I savored every second of it. But freedom came with risk. His precious true love, noticed my transformation as well. One evening, as lanterns flickered in the corridors, she cornered me in the garden. Her eyes glistened with false innocence. Her lips curved in a trembling smile. "Sister," she whispered, her voice soft as silk. "Why are you so cold to me lately? Have I offended you somehow?" Sister. That word tasted bitter on my tongue. I turned to her slowly, meeting her wide, pleading eyes. In my past life, I had fallen for this act. I had believed her fragile smiles, her gentle tone, her trembling hands. And while I pitied her, she had sharpened her knife in the shadows. "Not this time." I leaned closer, my lips brushing her ear as I whispered, "Save your tears. They may fool him, but they'll never fool me again." Her body stiffened, her act cracking for just a heartbeat before she forced a laugh. Sister, you misunderstand." "No," I cut her off, stepping back with a cold smile. "I understand perfectly." Her face paled, her mask slipping for an instant. Yes, she could sense it too. I was no longer the fool she could toy with, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. Independence wasn't just about silver or estates. It wasn't just about proving I wasn't weak. It was about reclaiming myself. Every smile I wore, every coin I earned, every word I spoke with confidence, these were pieces of me I had once thrown away for him. Now, I was gathering them back. And with each piece, I grew stronger. He could call me scheming. She could cry her crocodile tears. The world could whisper whatever it pleased. But this time, I would not kneel. This time, I would stand, and the higher I stood, the more it would break them when they fell. The next week passed like a performance. In my first life, I had spent these days desperately chasing after him, clinging to every opportunity to prove my devotion. I had waited outside his study with steaming bowls of soup. I had smiled through tears when he ignored me at banquets. I had bitten my tongue, even when the whispers of schema rang too loudly for me to bear, but now I lived as though he didn't exist. I laughed with the household servants, not caring when their eyes widened in surprise. I visited the library, pouring myself into books about trade and politics instead of embroidery patterns meant to please a husband. I even accompanied my cousin to a tea house in the city, something I never would have dared before. At first, he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he thought I was sulking, waiting for him to throw me a bone, but slowly, I felt his eyes. One evening as I strolled across the garden, trailing my fingers across the cool stone of the balustrade, I caught him watching me from the shadows of the veranda. His expression was unreadable: furrowed brows, lips pressed thin. In my past life, that look would have shattered me. I would have rushed over, begged to know what I had done wrong, promised to be better. But now, I tilted my chin higher, let a faint smile play across my lips, and walked away as though he were nothing more than another statue in the garden. That smile, calm, unbothered, untethered, was a blade sharper than any accusation. The real test came at the banquet. It was a gathering of nobles, filled with glittering gowns, clinking glasses, and the endless undercurrent and of politics. In my past life, I had embarrassed myself here. I had hovered near him, trying to hold his arm, trying to push his true love out of the spotlight. That night had ended with me cast as the jealous villainess, my reputation tarnished even further. But this time, I walked into the hall in a sapphire gown that shimmered like the night sky, my hair pinned with silver combs. I didn't look at him, didn't seek him, didn't even acknowledge the girl at his side. Instead, I greeted other guests with warmth, held conversations with poise, and even managed to draw laughter from a notoriously cold minister. The eyes that had once looked at me with scorn now lingered with curiosity, admiration, confusion, and when I felt his gaze sharp, burning into the back of my neck, I only laughed louder at someone else's joke. It was delicious. Later, as the banquet spilled into the garden, he finally approached me. His shadow fell across the marble path, and I turned, feigning polite surprise. "Fiancé," he said, his voice low. "You've been different lately." My lips curved into a polite, meaningless smile. "Oh, have I? You no longer seek me out." His words were measured, but there was a tension beneath them, as though he couldn't quite understand why this unsettled him. "Perhaps I've realized that I was foolish before," I answered softly, tilting my head as though I was simply reflecting on a childhood mistake, clinging to things that were never really mine. His jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" I met his eyes fully for the first time that evening, letting him see the calm steel in mine. "Nothing at all. Only that I've decided to live for myself from now on." And then I stepped around him, left him standing there in the moonlight, his fists clenched at his sides. I didn't need to look back to know he was unsettled. For the first time in our long, tangled history, I wasn't chasing him, but fate, it seemed, couldn't resist adding its own twists. The very next day, word spread like wildfire. The so-called true love he had vowed to protect had been caught in a scandal, a letter, a secret meeting. Another man's name whispered in the shadows. Of course, she wept prettily, claimed innocence, insisted it was all a misunderstanding, and he, just as I remembered, defended her. But this time, The seed of doubt was already sown. I watched from the sidelines, sipping tea, as he stormed out of the council chamber after yet another noble questioned her virtue. His mask of cold certainty had begun to crack, and in his eyes, when they flicked briefly toward me across the courtyard, I saw something new, not disdain, not anger, but the faintest, dangerous flicker of fear. Fear that the woman he once dismissed as scheming no longer needed him at all. The scandal was small, at first just whispers in the corridors, murmurs at tea houses. But whispers, if ignored, grow into storms. By the week's end, even the palace was buzzing. The young lady met another man in secret. Surely you've heard? Nonsense. She's innocent. Our hero himself vouched for her. But why would such letters exist at all if not for truth? The word spread like wildfire through dry brush, each retelling twisting sharper, crueler. In my first life, I had fought desperately against such rumors when they fell on me. I had cried, begged, and destroyed myself trying to prove innocence in a world that had already decided I was guilty. But watching her, now watching as she clutched his arm with trembling hands, as tears stained her delicate cheeks, I felt nothing but cold amusement. Let her taste it. Let her see how it feels when every gaze questions you. When every whispered laugh cuts deeper than a blade. I sat in the pavilion one afternoon, sipping chrysanthemum tea, when my maid leaned close and murmured, "My lady, the young master has been pacing the west courtyard. He seems troubled." Of course he was troubled. He had built his whole identity around protecting her, raising her above reproach. For him, she was light, purity, his sacred reason for defying the world. And now the world was laughing at her. His fortress of devotion had begun to crack. That evening, he sought me out, not her. Me. I was arranging scrolls in the study, preparing to review a text on trade tariffs. The door swung open, and there he stood, his presence filling the room like a storm. "You," he said sharply. I looked up slowly, raising a brow. "Fiancé, how rare for you to come here." His eyes burned. "You've heard the rumors." "Everyone has." I poured another cup of tea, calm as still water. "They're false." His voice was taut, like a bowstring ready to snap. "You will not repeat them. You will not spread them." I let out a soft laugh, setting the cup down with deliberate care. "Do you think me so childish? If I wanted to spread rumors, I would have done so long ago when I was the one drowning in them." His expression flickered, the faintest crack of guilt or perhaps just discomfort. "You." He swallowed the words, then finally muttered, "You seem different." "Because I am." I met his eyes evenly, unflinching. "I've no interest in playing games of love and jealousy." "You wanted her protected. Then protect her. But do not bring your burdens here, as though I am still waiting at your heel." His jaw tightened, but he didn't reply. Instead, he turned sharply, the hem of his cloak brushing the floor as he strode out. Yet the silence he left behind felt heavier than his presence. Days passed, and for the first time, I noticed him watching me not with disdain, but with something he couldn't name. When I walked with my cousin in the garden, his eyes followed. When I spoke with a visiting scholar about trade, he lingered at the edge of the hall, silent, listening. When I laughed not for him, never for him, he stiffened, as though the sound unsettled him. It too was intoxicating, this slow, subtle reversal, but I did not grow arrogant. I knew the game was only beginning, because while his fortress cracked, hers was far from crumbling. One evening, she came to me herself, her eyes red from weeping, her delicate hands clutching a silk handkerchief. She entered my chambers uninvited, the scent of jasmine clinging to her clothes. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. You're behind this, aren't you? I raised my gaze from the book in my lap, my lips curving into the faintest of smiles. Behind what? I asked mildly. The rumors. The letters. Her composure slipped, hysteria leaking through. You've always hated me. You've always been jealous. I repeated, tilting my head. My dear, you flatter yourself. Do you think I have time to waste weaving little scandals about you? I'm busy learning how to run estates and trade networks. Her face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I won't let you take him from me, she spat finally, her sweetness cracking, venom spilling out. I leaned back, my tone calm, almost bored. Take him? I don't want him. That stunned her into silence, and in that silence, her mask shattered just a little more. I knew then, the war had only just begun. The day after her visit, the atmosphere in the estate shifted. She no longer glided through the halls like an untouchable angel. No, she stumbled, her smiles too tight, her words too sharp. And when others whispered behind their hands, she snapped. I watched it all quietly. I didn't need to strike. She was breaking herself at a tea dinner. When a servant accidentally spilled soup near her sleeve, she slammed the bowl onto the table with such force the porcelain cracked. Everyone froze, even the older nobles present. In my first life, I would have rushed to soothe her, trying to shield her image, trying to protect her place. This time, I simply dabbed my lips with a napkin and continued eating as though nothing had happened. But my fiancé, he stared at her with something I had never seen before. Not pity, not admiration, not love, but doubt. That night, as lanterns flickered in the courtyard, he came to my chambers again. The knock was sharp, impatient. I opened the door, expecting one of the servants. But there he stood, his expression caught between anger and desperation. What did you say to her? He demanded. I raised a brow. To whom? You know who. His fists clenched at his sides. She's been shaken since speaking with you. Did you threaten her? A laugh escaped me, light, unrestrained. Threaten her? She barged into my room, accused me of scheming, and spat words dripping with jealousy. I merely told her the truth, that I want nothing to do with this game you both are so obsessed with. His eyes narrowed, searching my face. He was used to me begging, used to my tears, used to my desperate clinging. But all he found now was calm indifference. You've changed, he muttered almost to himself. Yes, I said softly, holding his gaze. I have. You may think me cruel, but I have no interest in repeating old mistakes. I won't fight for scraps of affection, nor will I beg for trust that was never mine. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned, his shoulders rigid, and left without another word. But I saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the unsettled turmoil he could no longer hide. Meanwhile, beyond the estate, something unexpected began to stir. At a gathering in the city, a council of merchants and minor nobles, I spoke briefly about trade tariffs. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, only what I had read and analyzed in quiet hours. Yet my words drew attention. Older men nodded thoughtfully. Younger scholars approached afterward, asking my thoughts. By the end of the night, whispers followed me. She's clever, not like they say, perhaps underestimated. And when I returned home, my cousin grinned, whispering, you don't even know the storm you've started, do you? I tilted my head, amused. I only spoke the truth, but inside, I felt a quiet satisfaction. For once, I was seen not as a schemer, not as a villainess, not as a shadow trailing after someone else's love, but as myself, of course. News traveled quickly, and when he heard that people praised me for my wit, for my composure, for my strength, something in him cracked further. A tea breakfast. His gaze lingered too long, his spoon stirring his tea though he never took a sip. She noticed, of course. Her hand trembled around her cup. Her lips pressed tight, and in that instant, the balance between us shifted again. Late one night, unable to bear the tension, she came to him in tears. "I'm the one you swore to protect," she cried, clutching his arm. "Don't let her take you away from me." But the silence that followed was deafening, because for the first time, he could not bring himself to say what he once would have shouted without hesitation, that she was his only, his forever, his light. Instead, his eyes darkened, his thoughts tangled, and my face flashed unbidden. In his mind, the storm finally broke at the spring festival. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, lanterns floating across the river, music drifting on the breeze, nobles and commoners alike gathered beneath blossoming peach trees. In my past life, I had made a fool of myself here. I had tried to cling to him before the crowd, desperate to prove that I was still his fiancé. I remembered how people had laughed, how she had played the victim so beautifully, how he had looked at me with cold disdain. But this time, I came as though the entire affair had nothing to do with him at all. I wore a gown of pale silver silk, embroidered with delicate cranes that caught the lantern light. My hair was arranged with only a single jade pin, simple, elegant, and when I stepped into the crowd, heads turned, not in mockery, not in pity, but in admiration. I didn't hover near him, didn't even glance his way. Instead, I spoke with the magistrate about city projects, laughed with children as they wrote wishes on lanterns, and even recited a line of poetry when asked. I lived fully, freely, and the more I shone, the more tightly she clutched his arm, her smile straining, her laughter hollow. The breaking point came when one of the nobles, emboldened by wine, raised his voice for all to hear. It seems the young miss carries herself with more dignity than the one our young master swore to protect. The crowd hushed, her face drained of color. My fiancé stiffened, his jaw clenched. In my first life, I would have seized the chance, lashed out, gloated, proven my superiority. But now, I simply lowered my gaze, smiled faintly, and replied, "It isn't a competition. We are all simply guests tonight, nothing more." The words were soft, harmless, yet they landed like a blade, because humility only sharpened the contrast. She snapped. Her voice rang shrill across the courtyard. "Don't be fooled. She's scheming, always scheming. She only pretends to be gentle, but inside, she's poisonous." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, not with sympathy, but with shock, because she had lost control, because the mask she wore so carefully had slipped, revealing the venom beneath. I remained silent, calm, serene, the very picture of restraint, and in that silence, she destroyed herself. Later, when the lanterns had been released, when the laughter had returned in broken fragments, he found me alone, by the riverbank, the glow of drifting lights reflected in his eyes. But they were shadowed, heavy. "You knew this would happen," he said, his voice low, almost hoarse. I turned, meeting his gaze evenly. "No, I didn't." She revealed herself. I did nothing. His lips parted, but no words came. He had no defense, no righteous speech left to give. For the first time, he looked lost. I let the silence stretch between us, the river carrying away the weight of what neither of us spoke aloud. Finally, I said softly, You once vowed to protect her, to shield her no matter what. But tell me, Fiancé, who will protect you when the truth you've ignored finally crushes you? His breath caught, his hands curling into fists. But I didn't stay to watch him unravel. I left him there, beneath the lanterns, his fortress collapsing around him. The next morning, I woke to find the estate in chaos. Whispers spread through servants' corridors like wildfire. Nobles were already drafting petitions. The scandal that had seemed small days ago now blazed uncontrollably, and in the center of it all she wept, begged, and clawed at the man who once swore he would never abandon her. But this time, his eyes no longer held certainty, only doubt, only fear, and, though he refused to admit it, the faintest flicker of regret. The scandal didn't fade, it roared like an untamed fire. Letters surfaced, witnesses whispered, and the nobles who once turned a blind eye now circled like vultures. In my first life, he had fought like a lion to protect her, his voice loud and unwavering, no matter how damning the evidence. But now, his voice faltered. At team meetings, he argued less. His tone was strained, his words unconvincing. When ministers raised their brows and asked, "Are you so blind?" he clenched his fists but offered no answer. I saw it in his eyes, the seed of doubt that grew no matter how he tried to smother it, and I watched from the sidelines, sipping my tea as the empire shifted piece by piece. I had promised myself never to meddle in their so-called love again. And yet, fate had a cruel sense of humor. For even in my silence, her mask crumbled faster than I could have imagined. One evening, she came to me again. This time, she didn't bother pretending. Her hair was disheveled, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wild with desperation. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed, slamming the door behind her. "You think because he's looking at you differently, because the nobles praise you, that you can take him from me?" I closed the book in my lap and looked up, calm as ever. "I told you before. I don't want him, liar," she shrieked, her voice breaking. "Everything you do, everything you say, it's to make him doubt me, to make him leave me. You're crueler than anyone I've ever known." For a heartbeat, I almost pitied her. She was like a bird with broken wings, thrashing in a cage she built herself. But pity, I had learned, was a dangerous indulgence. "You're wrong," I said softly, my words sharp as ice. "I don't need to take anything from you. You're destroying yourself." And he's simply opening his eyes to see it. Her hand shook as it hovered near the jeweled hairpin at her temple. For a moment, I thought she might strike me. But instead, she spun, her voice ragged. "If I can't have him, then no one will." And she fled into the night. The next morning, chaos erupted. She had gone to the council chamber, thrown herself to her knees before the nobles, and screamed accusations not at me, but at him. "He doesn't love me. He only used me for pity. He promised me forever, but now looks at another." Her wails echoed through the marble halls, every word tearing at the fragile image of purity she had tried so desperately to maintain. And he, my once proud fiancé, stood frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling at his sides. The nobles looked on, some disgusted, others amused. And though I wasn't there, word spread quickly. The fortress he had built, the vow he had clung to, had shattered completely. He was no longer her savior, no longer her knight, no longer the man with unshakable conviction. He was broken. That night, he came to me, not as the arrogant heir, not as the righteous protector, but as a man undone. His shoulders slumped, his voice hoarse. "Tell me, when did it go wrong?" he whispered, his eyes searching mine as though I held the answers to his ruin. And for the first time, I saw him clearly, not as the man I once loved blindly, but as a fragile soul, crushed under the weight of his own misguided devotion. But I did not reach for him. I only whispered, "It went wrong the moment you chose blindness over truth," and I turned away, leaving him in the silence he had carved for himself. By morning, the estate was alive with whispers and speculation. The scandal had grown beyond their control. Nobles discussed the events of the night before with veiled smirks and knowing glances. Servants whispered, merchants lingered longer in the courtyard, and even the local magistrates' men had begun visiting, quietly questioning witnesses. And he, my once arrogant fiancé, was at the heart of it all. A storm of regret and confusion. In my first life, I would have rushed to him, tried to comfort, beg, or salvage what had already been lost. This time, I walked past him, shoulders straight, head held high, letting the chaos swirl around him without my interference. It was during a late afternoon stroll in the bamboo garden that I finally encountered him directly. He stood beneath the dappled light, hands clenched, jaw tight. For years, he had been the center of my world, my torment, my obsession. And now, I realized he was just a man. A flawed, broken man, trying to cling to a love that had never truly been his. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice low, almost pleading. I stopped walking, letting the bamboo leaves brush my shoulders. Calmly, I replied, "Doing what?" Letting her crumble, letting me suffer, letting everything fall apart. I tilted my head, studying him. "Because you finally see the truth. You've spent so long protecting her, blind to reality, that it took ruin for you to understand." He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "But you could have helped her. You could have stayed silent and lost myself?" I asked softly, my eyes sharp. "No, I will not sacrifice myself for a love that was never mine. I will not bow to false loyalty. This time, I choose me." For a moment, he said nothing. His eyes darkened, flickering between anger, guilt, and something else I had not expected, admiration. Meanwhile, news from the city brought an unexpected opportunity. A wealthy benefactor, impressed by my intelligence and composure, offered me a position managing a series of trade networks and estates. A role that would give me not only financial independence, but influence far beyond the reach of my former life. It was tempting, dangerous, liberating. I considered it carefully. In my first life, I would have turned it down, afraid of leaving the safety of familiar walls. This time, I seized it. "I will go," I told Liane, my head held high. "And when I return, nothing, no man, no rival, no scandal will have power over me." Liane's eyes glistened with pride. "My lady, you're truly different now." I smiled faintly. "Different isn't enough. I intend to be unstoppable." That night, the twist arrived. As I prepared to leave for the city, a letter arrived, delivered not by servant, but by a messenger wearing the insignia of the highest noble council. The contents were simple, a formal challenge to testify publicly to the truths that had shaken the estate, to reveal the rival's deception before all witnesses. The timing, impeccable. I realized then that fate itself had chosen this moment to tip the scales. The scandal could either destroy me or cement my rise, and I, reborn, fearless, unyielding, would not hesitate. I held the letter in my hand, feeling the weight of years I had wasted on fear and obedience. And oh more, the rival had underestimated me. The fiancé had failed to see me. The world had thought me weak. But now, everything was mine to reclaim. And when the day came for the council's meeting, when whispers became roars, I would stand tall, and they would all see who I truly was. The council chamber was packed. Noblemen in embroidered robes, advisors with meticulous notes, and the ever-present servants who whispered in corners. Every I turned toward the center of the room. In my first life, I would have trembled, tried to shrink into the shadows, hoping the storm would pass. This time, I walked in with confidence, every step measured, every gaze poised. The rival sat at the front, her posture stiff, a carefully painted smile frozen on her face. She looked at me as though I were a threat, though in truth, she was already teetering on the edge of collapse. My fiancé stood beside her, his expression unreadable. But I saw the tension coiled beneath his calm, the way his fists twitched, the faint quiver of his jaw. He had begun to realize the foundation of his perfect love was cracking, and I was ready. The magistrate called the meeting to order, his voice echoing across the marble hall. Miss, her name. You are accused of misleading the council and attempting to manipulate the young master through deception. Present your defense. She opened her mouth, hesitated, and then turned her gaze toward my fiancé. He knows the truth, she said, her voice trembling. He knows I'm innocent. She's scheming to ruin me. Laughter rippled quietly through the chamber. I stepped forward, my voice calm but carrying across the room like steel. Your innocence is easily disproven, I said, holding up letters, notes, and testimony collected over the past weeks. Every action, every secret meeting, every attempt to manipulate him documented. The council will judge, not by tears or cries, but by evidence. Gasps filled the room. She faltered, clutching at her sleeves. Lies, all lies. He would never. I raised a hand, silencing her without raising my voice. You believed loyalty and virtue would shield you. But truth cannot be hidden by beauty or by cries. And the moment you let deceit dictate your actions, you sealed your own fate. The council members murmured approval. Whispers turned into nods. Even some nobles who had favored her began to glance at her with skepticism. My fiancé stepped forward. Enough, he said, his voice unsteady, betraying the storm inside. He looked at her, and then at me, and finally at the evidence laid bare. She shrank under his gaze, realizing the foundation she had relied on, his unwavering protection, was gone. And in that moment, he looked at me, not with the cold arrogance of before, not with the ownership of the past, but with something else: recognition, respect, and the faintest glimmer of admiration. The rival tried one last desperate move, her voice rising, eyes wide, hands trembling. You'll regret this. You'll regret taking him from me. I smiled faintly. I am not taking him. I am only taking back what was always mine: my dignity, my peace, my life. He belongs to no one but himself, and so do I. Her face drained of color. She realized, too late, that all her schemes, her tears, her manipulations, had crumbled. The council ruled swiftly. Her reputation was tarnished, her influence shattered. And though she still clung to the fard of innocence, no one believed her anymore. As the chamber emptied, my fiancé lingered. Why didn't you? He began, but then faltered, unsure of what to say. I turned to him, calm and measured, the storm of the past months reflected in my haze. I did nothing, I said simply. You have seen the truth for yourself. It was never about scheming, manipulation, or rivalry. It was about me finally choosing myself. He looked at me, the weight of realization settling across his features. He had loved blindly, protected the wrong person, and ignored the one who had quietly built herself into something stronger than either of them had imagined. And in that moment, the scales of power had fully shifted. The estate was quiet the morning after the council's verdict. No whispers, no scheming, no trembling rival in the hallways. Only the calm of a world reordered. I walked through the garden, feeling the soft wind brush against my cheeks. The trees seemed brighter, the sky wider. I was free not just from her, not just from him, but from the weight of my own past failures. In my first life, I would have waited for him, pleaded, begged, sacrificed. I would have measured my happiness in fragments of his attention. This time, I measured it in my own heartbeat, my own courage, my own choices. He found me at the pavilion, not with arrogance, not with commands, not with accusations. He approached slowly, eyes wary but filled with something he had never let me see before: humility. He began, hesitating, searching for words. I was wrong. About everything. I didn't see you. I didn't see the truth. I didn't understand what mattered. I studied him quietly, letting the silence stretch. I could feel his regret, yes, but more importantly, I could feel his recognition of who I had become. You've realized too late, I said softly, that life isn't about vows you can't keep, or protecting someone blindly. It's about seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and valuing those who value themselves. He nodded, swallowing hard. I see now. And I admire you. For standing tall. For surviving everything. For being you. I let a faint smile play across my lips. Thank you. That is all I needed to hear. For the first time, we didn't speak of love, betrayal, or obligation. We spoke only of truth. Days passed and life shifted into new rhythms. I accepted the position in the city, managing estates, trade networks, and finances. My influence grew, and so did my confidence. I met scholars, merchants, and nobles who valued intelligence over beauty, strategy over charm. And him? He watched from a distance at first. Not in possession, not in ownership, but in genuine admiration. He learned that love, if it ever existed for him, must respect freedom. That devotion without understanding was meaningless. We didn't rush into declarations, nor did we cling to the past. We existed side by side, as equals, as observers of the world we had rebuilt differently. And the rival? She faded into obscurity, her schemes remembered only as cautionary tales. The arrogance that had once filled her heart crumbled under her own hand. I had no need for revenge, no desire for triumph. My life was triumph enough. My choices were victory enough. One evening, as lanterns floated across the river, he approached me quietly. "May I walk with you?" he asked, humble, sincere. I nodded. We walked together in silence, the ripples of the river reflecting the light of our own quiet rebirth. "Do you forgive me?" he asked at last, voice soft. I smiled, not with pity, not with triumph, but with understanding. I don't need to forgive. I've already moved forward. That is what matters. And in that moment, I felt the full weight of my rebirth: freedom, clarity, and the knowledge that I would never again be a shadow in someone else's story. I had been reborn. And this time, I was whole. And that's a wrap. A huge thank you to everyone for watching. This channel is nothing without this amazing community. If you have ideas for future videos, drop them down in the comments below. As always, subscribe if you're new here. Until next time, take care.